Hello, everyone. I wanted to take a moment today to speak to collective awakening and ascension and what that means. Because I see a lot of different viewpoints, which is fine, it's beautiful. A lot of us in the beginning don't know what it is. And like with anything, we don't really know what anything is until we actually begin to come through it. And then we're able to describe it. So I see a lot of souls describing what they haven't yet experienced, which is beautiful because we all need to start to understand things, and we all want to get information out. We all want to share, but a lot of the information is coming from other sources that haven't really completely come through or fully embody the experience to share back in a more clear perspective, to open up, much more. So, when I speak to collective awakening, I'll go back to 2020 when I saw a massive ascension portal open up. And what that said to me is that all humanity was basically getting switched on in a way. Doesn't mean they were getting pushed into their awakening, it just means they were activated to all awaken, the way I see it, just to put it into simple terms. It was the point when all of humanity was now able to fully ascend at their own pace. Stargates, portals opened up, and it was just this massive ascension gateway that opened up for all of humanity. Now, awakening means different things to different people, and so does ascension. But what really are they, right? So, an awakening to me is like pre-ascension. Awakening is when a human is being awakened from within. They've hit a certain light quotient within themselves. We've anchored in enough light by not avoiding every single thing that's coming up to activate our awakening within ourselves. And what that means is we start to feel everything, we start to see everything, we start to feel things differently than we ever did before. Everything just starts to seem different. And this can go on for quite a while. We start to see more of the corruption in the world. We start to see a lot of things we had the blinders on to. A lot of us just didn't want to talk about things that were going on in the world, or just ignored it, or, there's all kinds of different reasons for not wanting to pay attention to what was going on in the world. And, some of us didn't care. Some, I know at one point I didn't care. I didn't really care what was going on in the rest of the world. I just knew it was a mess. So, there's so many reasons why we can avoid wanting to know what's going on in the world, or all these things, or why this is happening and that's happening. But ultimately, we're just avoiding what's going on in life and the world because we don't want to hear, we don't want to know, or it's just too much, or something like that. So, as a soul begins to awaken, it begins to get pretty intense because they start to see all the things, and a lot of the things that they've been avoiding or didn't want to know. And that can be intense and powerful, and it's also very beautiful because there's so much being opened up. But in that, the intensity of the feelings get really big, like really big. So, in the beginning of an awakening, there's a lot of people screaming to the high heavens, like, this is corrupt, this is corrupt, this isn't right, the world's a mess. And yeah, that's completely correct. But it's all very purposeful, and it's all part of our awakening. And in the beginning of an awakening, the human doesn't see that this is all perfect and this is all supposed to be happening. And it, that can sound crazy, but an awakening is just that. We're being awakened out of a deep illusion, a deep manipulated illusion. I'm sure many that watch this video are starting to feel how manipulated almost anything is these days. It was something we probably didn't want to look at before, or didn't even acknowledge, or didn't know. But the more you start to open up and awaken, the more you just can't not see it. It's right there. It's right in front of our face. And the deeper you go, the more you realize basically every single thing in the world has been manipulated to a point to stifle humanity in different ways, to keep us lost, to keep us slave to a reality that doesn't work with who we really are. our true purpose has been hidden as a collective, as humanity, what we're actually here for, which to me is to awaken and to ascend ourselves back out of the illusion. And we purposely chose this, all of us. And that can be interesting for people. Some get really upset with that. And why would I choose this? Well, you'll find out. That's part of your journey. It's part of all of our journeys, is to find out. We actually get the clarity. That's the beauty. The beauty of coming through an ascension and ascending your consciousness is that you get to see it all. You end up becoming the quantum field, and you end up beginning to see everything, because the field holds everything in it. We get to realize that this is a quantum reality. It's not just a fixed linear reality. You begin to realize that everything's being magnetized everywhere. All the experiences in your life are being magnetized to you, right? But getting back to awakening is like, is it pre-ascension? It's when we're starting to feel, we're starting to open up, we're starting to see things. You know, some will avoid this because they don't want to feel. A lot of us turned off our feelers a long time ago. We didn't want to feel. There's a lot of people that say they're empathic, but everybody's really empathic if you want to get down to it. We all just either turned it on or turned it off. It's whether we want to feel or whether we don't. It's a choice. Most don't want to feel things because it can be painful, I guess, if you want to use words. It can be painful to feel the corruption in the world and all these things, but is it really painful, or is it just that we don't want to see it for what it truly is? Because on a higher level, it's actually happening for us to awaken, all of it. It's meant to squeeze us to a point where we finally have enough and we wake up and we say enough. And this is where we are as collective humanity right now. As a whole collective, we're all being awakened and we're all awakening and ascending. We're all in different places. So when I speak to collective, I speak to the entire collective of humanity is now going through some piece of their awakening. Whether it's still be dipping their toes in the very beginning and not wanting to see anything and completely avoiding everything, still in the beginning of your awakening. And awakening kind of leads right into the beginning of ego. The ego, I'll call it pre-ego, because that's basically the end of ascension to me is pre-ego, or the end of awakening becomes like pre-ego to me. I kind of just named it pre-ego because this is a phase where the ego starts to kind of come out, because that's ascension. Ascension is releasing the ego, and ego is the matrix. To me, the ego is the matrix of control that binds us to a lower 3D illusion and all the manipulation. So awakening can go on forever. If someone not really, at this point, no. At this point, awakening can only go so far before humanity just gets pushed into the next phase. And that's kind of happening right now for a lot of people. They're getting pushed into a new phase and being forced to see a lot of stuff, which is their traumas and stuff like that. And that's when we start getting pushed into more of the ascension process, right? So awakening is just awakening. It's just waking up to what's going on in the world. It's waking up to what's going on inside. It's waking up to feeling things. It's waking up to a lot of things we avoided. This can drag out for as long as we really try to, but you know, I'm starting to see that right now in humanity and just with all the frequencies pouring through, it's in the alignments and everything that's happening in the sun, it's forcing everyone into this new phase, as I was just saying. So a lot that we're avoiding and really just not wanting to feel and not wanting to see anything, they're getting pushed right into feeling deeply. And what that starts to do is it starts to activate the density to come up, right? And so the way that we flip from awakening into the ascension phase is when we actually start to deal with ourselves, is when we actually start to take action. But ascension is huge. It's a very long process, and it's supposed to be, because we're releasing our ego in the beginning. So what we're doing is we're moving from awakening, we're moving into ascending our consciousness. So ascension, let's speak to ascension. It's very beautiful. So awakening and ascension kind of start to mix together for a little while until the human actually wants to go in a little bit further into their journey and say, like, I want to do this. I want to do more. I want to work through some things. I want to be a better person. Right? That's a whole new phase. It's kind of to me, that's where awakening kind of starts to needle its way into ascension, but it kind of bibs and bobs back and forth. because the human doesn't really want to go all in and do the work that we really need to do. Because when we get into ascension, it's 24/7. There is nothing other than 24/7. And if we're not working on ourselves 24/7 and being present and observing ourselves 24/7, things just get very interesting, as I'll get into. But that interesting point of moving from awakening into ascension is a beautiful point where a lot of people are getting pushed into right now, a lot. And so this is where you're going to feel a lot of trauma coming up, a lot of past traumas, past experiences, like painful memories, big emotions, big stored emotions coming up, like in droves, just massive intensity. It's all stuck, right? So it's all stuck inside of us. So now when we look back and we go back to our childhood, and if I was to say we were born into a reality that was already fixed and manipulated very well, and we didn't know that, so we just started taking all this manipulation and the conditioning and the programming as real, and just life is supposed to be corrupt like this and very messed up, then we basically create a 3D reality, and that's our ego. We're creating our ego from when we're young, and this is like the judgment, the shame, the blame, the guilt, the lack. That's basically the basis of an entire 3D reality, is shame, blame, guilt, lack, judgment, fear, control. I'm better than you, you're better than them. It's all separation. Greed. It's all separation. The ego is separation itself, and the ego is 3D. So when we talk about 3D, when we talk about the matrix, to me, 3D in the matrix, it's your ego. We build our ego. We start to judge people. We start to shame and blame ourselves and other people and all these things. And what happens through that is we start to build up density. Every time we judge someone, we stick a little piece of density inside of us. That judgment doesn't go away because we didn't resolve it. We're judging someone, and it's very toxic to judge anything. We weren't taught that, though. We were taught the opposite. We were taught to judge people. And you'll start to realize that everything we were taught was kind of backwards. We were taught to do a lot of lower vibrational, lower frequency things. And in that, we build up density. And this world was created, not the whole world, but this reality that we're playing in was created by people that didn't have best interest for humanity at hand. They didn't want us to awaken. And more might be starting to see that right now and feel that. They didn't want us to awaken, so they created a really manipulated reality. We bought it all. We took it in since we were kids. You know, I start seeing young children at the age of 2 or 3 playing with fear because they're taking it on from outside themselves, from parents, from grandparents, from just school, from people, from anything. You know, we as humanity, you'll notice humanity likes to follow others, and not many are really doing their own thing and following their own path, and that's because humanity just wants things done for them, and they want it to be told kind of what to do. And this is like what happened through conditioning, through a lot of conditioning and programming. You know, like we were taught not to like ourselves. We were taught love backwards. We were taught all kinds of things so messed up. And what that does is it makes us believe we live in this reality that's really like tough and hard and rigid and not so fun. Everything's corrupt, right? Like everything feels like off. Right, and our job as we awaken is to say, wow, that's not right. Like, I want to do something about that. What can I do about that? And then you have a lot of people that feel, well, I want to fix the world, and they start trying to fix the world, but really, the way that you want to do it consciously is to start to fix ourselves first. When we start to fix ourselves, the outer world just becomes beautiful. When we realize that things are all just happening the way they're happening. But it's actually our inside that's all messed up. Because we hold all that density. Because we're holding all those judgments, all the shame, the blame, the guilt, the self-worth. Massive deficiency of self-worth and self-love. You know, as humans, we don't really respect ourselves too much. Integrity is like a word that I don't see many people holding true as their reality. They don't live through integrity. You know, or respecting each other and who we are as people, and not judging others. We became a toxic society in the sense where we didn't realize we were being conditioned to just judge everybody and shame and blame everyone, which is just massive ego. As I shared earlier, the ego is shame, blame, guilt, judgment, lack, fear, control, greed, jealousy. It's just all these components of separation. It's like the ego is separation itself, right? So what we're doing is we're awakening to see that, and then we're going to send our consciousness out of all of that. So now we move into ascension, which is the ascension of our consciousness at the beginning. Then it's going to be the ascension of our physical body after we ascend our consciousness. But to ascend our consciousness, we're releasing all the fragments of our ego, which means we're going in, and over years, that's why it drags out. It doesn't really drag out, but it's meant to go over years. Over years, we're going inside, and we're intentionally dealing with all of our density, all of our dysfunction, all of our trauma, all of our painful memories, all the stuck emotions, every single judgment we ever made of ourselves and others, all the shame and blame, guilt that we put on ourselves and others, every single story. That's what ascension is. Ascension is the resolving and dissolving and taking responsibility for all of this stuff. Because then we get to a point where we realize we actually created all these experiences for ourselves. We magnetized it all into our reality, either through karmic or through choices. Like as we ascend, we're actually releasing all of our karmic energy, all of the dysfunction, karma from other existences. Some of the big, painful, traumatic memories could be very physical, that are just horrid to remember. It's an interesting piece to realize that on a much, much, much higher level, that's karmic energy that came in. It's being pulled through another existence into this existence, and it's not going to make sense to go look into another existence to try and find the experience you had to try and make this make sense. That won't make any sense. That won't work. It's not how this works. It's very linear. What's happening is that energy, just the energy of whatever's being held, is being brought into this reality. And whatever existences that are still sitting in us and came through into this reality with us, that karma needs to be resolved and dissolved and taken responsibility for. We're not going to see, like the mind wants to see this exact moment that we did it in some other existence and fix it. But this is just not how it's going to work. It's just energy that came through. We're going to have the experience. We're going to hold it as massive trauma. And at some point through our awakening and ascension, we're going to realize that actually that's karma. And we actually called that into our reality so we could have the experience, so we could later work through it, resolve and dissolve it. And now we're resolving and dissolving the karma from another existence. Then we also have choices. We all make choices. We all make very unconscious choices because we were taught to do that. We didn't realize we were unconscious though. We thought we were actually like really tuned in because we were told our mind was everything. But really, to me, the mind is the storage facility for all the manipulation. And we'll call it the lower mind. The lower mind is your 3D mind. That's all it knows, is just everything it took in. It knows nothing else. It guesses based off of what it's taken in. The ego is basically the matrix that takes all that information and tells us what to do. So we have to ascend ourselves out of all of that, because that is what binds us to a 3D, a third dimensional reality, to the illusion, to the manipulation. As long as we still hold judgment within us, we are bound to 3D. We're still holding our ego. As long as we still hold our emotions, because emotions are part of the ego matrix too. Sad, mad, angry, upset, even happy. I don't use the word happy because once you ascend your consciousness in your physical body and you become whole and complete, you don't try to be happy. You don't have to be happy. You don't even use the word. You're just always elated and in pure joy and bliss. That's just what it is. That's the whole point of ascending, is releasing all the separation. And imagine having no separation within you. Imagine being so free. That's freedom, right? Imagine being so free that anything anybody ever says doesn't even bother you, because you realize that you don't hold anything inside and there's nothing to trigger. Like, triggers are our own. Does anybody know that? I'm sure you do, but on a higher level, do you know that every single time you're triggered, it's actually what you hold inside? It's not the other person. The other person's just activating what you hold inside. And usually we'll just go blame somebody and get upset with them, not realizing that they're just showing us what we hold inside. They don't know that. They're having a conversation. But when you get into a higher understanding of how all this works, everybody's being magnetized into everybody's reality. You know, a car accident's not a car accident. Accidents don't really exist. We were told accidents exist, so we'd give our power away. So we wouldn't realize this is a quantum reality where we're magnetizing experiences to ourselves. It won't make sense to an unawakened human why they got into a car accident and how that relates to magnetism and how they magnetized into their reality. They'll feel that's an accident and it happened to them, and that'll become a victim story and a trauma, just like our childhood. And then at some point, that's going to come up through our ascension. We're going to have to deal with that, and we're going to have to say, oh. And then all of a sudden, you know, through going inward and having inward time, closing our eyes and asking questions, and we're tuning into our higher self and our universe, we'll start to ask questions, and we'll start to see how we actually magnetize that into our reality and why it was magnetized into our reality. That's how awesome this life really is. You know, in 3D, when we're unconscious, we feel that things just happen. There's no reason why. It just happens randomly. There's accidents and bad, good, right, and wrong, and everybody's bad and good and right and wrong. And when you get into higher consciousness, that's just not true. That's all very linear and very fixed and very 3D, and that's why everybody's just so... Everybody's blaming and shaming each other because that's all they know. Right? Like, there's a massive deficit of self-love on this in this earth reality. Because self-love is true love. Loving ourselves for everything we are, for every experience, for everything. That's true love. And everybody's looking for true love with someone else. So it's really backwards. And then we're trying to find someone else, and then we get into a relationship with someone, and we're holding all of our past with all of our other relationships. And we keep getting triggered out with this person because this person is a reflection of all the stuff we hold inside. So we could be in a relationship for another 30 years, and it's a product of the relationships before us. And we're still holding the stuff from the relationships before us that are actually coming through this relationship, because each relationship is meant to show us what we hold inside. We magnetize to us what we need to see to have the experiences to resolve what we hold inside. It's very interesting. It's much different than the way we've been told. We're all just looking for a beautiful soul, someone who's really awesome and amazing in so many different ways and beautiful on the inside, outside. That's what we're looking for, and when we're trying to get married and have kids, because that's what we're told to do, and go have a job and make good money. But that's the slave world, and that's a manipulated reality that we were told to have. It's very fixed. It's not sharing that when you find the self-love within you, you actually find your soul partner. And when you find your soul partner, that's even much different than people, or twin flame, or whatever you want to call it, becomes much different than anybody really wants to realize either. Because at that point, a twin flame scenario, or sacred partner, I call it sacred partners, is like you're meant to actually rip each other to the core and help each other release all your dysfunction and all your trauma from your entire life. And you'll be very opposite in that sense, very opposite people. You won't be identical. You'll be very different, and you'll start to trigger each other out. And if you've been together for a long time, you've got a lot of stuff that has to come up and get out. And that's all part of this. That's out. That's once we get deeper into the awakening and through the awakening into the ascension process and ascending the consciousness, that's when all this stuff starts coming up. Because it's got to go. You know, a lot of people feel they're living a 5D reality because they're really sacred and done, you know, and that's beautiful. To get really sacred is a beautiful process. It is absolutely just beautiful. But the interesting part is a lot of people are getting sacred before they're releasing all their traumas, and then feeling that looking into the trauma is actually releasing it, but that's not releasing it. That's actually just the beginning and looking into it. And that's when the deeper processes begin. So there's a lot getting pushed into their traumas that they felt they might have dealt with in a ceremony or somewhere else, or some healer maybe did it for them, but they're starting to realize that it's all coming back up on repeat, and why. And I just wrote an article about this. And, you know, if we've been to healers and we've been to ceremonies, many ceremonies are healers, and we've, you know, been told we've been healed from this, or we've gone to get healed from something and we feel we've been healed. And then, you know, a year or two later, or months later, it starts coming back up on repeat. Does that mean it was healed? Or does that mean it's still stuck inside? Because I'm going to share that nobody can take responsibility for your own choices. I know that some don't want to hear this because that means you have to work through your stuff, but that's part of an awakening. That's what an awakening and ascension is. We have to take responsibility for ourselves, for all of our unconsciousness we've ever created in this entire life since we were born. It's a pretty big task. So as many feel they've awakened and ascended already, and they can't explain any of this, then there's a point in there, right? There's more work to do. It's not out there in the mainstream. I always say mainstream, but just because I call it mainstream social media and all that, when you got spiritual groups and conscious groups and all that. I'm not seeing any of this higher information being shared in there, and that's because a lot haven't moved through that piece yet. And in mainstream, a lot of people want fluffy. They don't want the bigger information. Sometimes I share this information in some of the spiritual or conscious groups, and they won't share it because it doesn't fit the Skittles and rainbows part, when everybody wants, like, you know, to hang on to like the secret and these little things that make them feel good. But the point of the whole journey is actually to go through all the stuff that doesn't feel good. And that's what everybody's avoiding, is the stuff that doesn't feel good. You know, humanity stuffed their whole life down. I did. We all did. How does that go? How does that get released from our body? Nobody can do it for us. People can move energy and do a lot of awesome stuff and help our bodies out and all kinds of stuff in a physical manner like that. But nobody can take responsibility for our unconscious choices. It's very simple. We made choices in our life that created experiences, and no healer or ceremony can go in and actually take responsibility for our choices for us, right? I just want to be very clear about that, because it was a big piece that I got stuck in. I got stuck going to ceremonies over and over and over, feeling it was all being healed for me, just going to the ceremonies and having an intention for it to clear. But all that was really happening was I was being shown all of my own dysfunction that I needed to take responsibility for. And until I figured that out, I just sat and stewed in it, and it just kept repeating and repeating, and I felt like overwhelmed, and it felt very intense. Like when all the judgments started coming through, and the victim stories that I held for my whole life, and then I kept going to ceremonies feeling I was taking medicine and doing all these things, and the shaman was singing it away and taking care of it all for me. It wasn't happening like that. I was just being shown all my stuff, and every ceremony I went to, I saw the same stuff. And then I wouldn't see anything for a while, and then I'd see the same stuff, and I'd be like, what's going on? And I realized I had to take responsibility for my whole life. Every single thing, every single judgment I ever made on myself or others, I had to take responsibility for that. And all of us do. That's the whole point of our awakening and our ascension, right? So we're ascending our consciousness out of the illusion, out of the manipulation, out of the trauma, out of the dysfunction, out of all the separation, out of all the emotions. We're releasing all of that. And that's how we ascend our consciousness. So we can't actually ascend our consciousness until we actually intentionally go in and take care of and resolve and dissolve, take responsibility for our whole ego matrix, all the victim, all the shame, all the blame, all the guilt. And that's how we actually anchor into 5D, into fifth dimensional reality. So there's a lot of people out there saying they're living 5D, but they're actually just seeing bits of 5D, and they're still living and embodying a fourth dimensional reality, because they haven't given up the convenience, they haven't given up the material world, or they have given up some of these things, but they're still attached in some ways. Still attached to the money, the job, the followers, and things like that. And that's totally fine. It's beautiful. We're all in different places and parts. I'm just sharing a higher version of all this so that we can all pull together and you know, in our own ways say, okay, that makes sense, right, that's maybe why this is happening, okay. But I see a lot of people getting stuck in their traumas right now, so I really wanted to share why that's all coming up, because this is the next phase of awakening. It's like the later phase of awakening, just before coming into the ascension process, right? So there's this trauma, like I feel people get stuck in the traumas for a little while because they don't know what to do with it all. And it just keeps looping and looping and looping until the person starts to actually deal with it, because they can't take it anymore. And that's how it went for me. I just couldn't take it anymore. And I started searching within myself, and I started realizing like, wait, why does this keep coming up? And then I started to understand that I was just a victim to my whole life. And in being victim to my whole life, that was ego. I was holding myself in just a state of ego, being a victim to everything that actually happened for me. Because everything is happening for us. Everything is a gift. Everything's a beautiful opportunity and a gift. The most horrible things end up being a beautiful gift and opportunity down the road. It's so backwards to what we've been taught. We've just been manipulated so deeply, right? And when we get into the ascension process, it becomes very physical. The game changes. Like when you get into physical body ascension, I used to go to gym 6 days a week when I was going through my big awakening processes and in the beginning of my ego release and surrender. Some call it death. I'll just say the ego death part is when we're not intentionally working through things and our realities start collapsing in on us. and we don't know what's going on anymore, and that's because we're not intentionally doing anything. So that's ego death. But ego release and surrender is when we're purposely choosing to intentionally release everything. But when we get into the physical body ascension part, it becomes so physical that I couldn't go to the gym anymore. So my 6 days a week at the gym, it went completely gone. I now could go maybe once or twice a week, and I could barely lift weights anymore. Your body starts to shift. We start to activate our light body, and all kinds of different processes start to begin. All of our organs, our skin, our bones, our teeth, our blood, everything starts to get worked through on an atomic level. You know, we start to embody the universe within us and birth the universe from within us as we start to go through our physical body ascension. It's so beautiful and so powerful. But there's all these different stages. Like for me, from the beginning of my let's say the end of my kind of awakening when I was coming into pre-ego, it took me 10 years to get through the ascension of my physical body, through ascension of my consciousness, and then through the ascension of my physical body. It took 10 years. And now I'm just on the other side of that. And we keep going, and we're working towards a 12th dimensional embodiment, a physical 12th dimensional embodiment where we open up 24 strand DNA, 12 double helix. It's really powerful. And this is where all of our awesomeness comes from. You know, we talk about gifts and all these things. Everybody's got all kinds of gifts, and we have like very similar gifts, and then we have our own unique, very special, beautiful gifts. But in truth, we're all, as we ascend our consciousness, we literally get access, and we merge with our higher self, and we gain access to the quantum field where we can see everything. And in the quantum reality, past and the present and the future are all happening right now. And that gets really confusing for the mind. But the reason I can see way ahead and way behind, and like it's all happening right now, is because it is happening right now. But to the human, they have a past and the future, so they're living in time. Right? The more conscious we get, we start not to live in time. You have to set the clock to go somewhere or timer or whatever, but other than that, you release time and you don't live in it anymore. You don't care what time it is. You're doing things based on consciousness. Does this feel good for me right now? Is this aligned? Time starts to slip away and fall away the more conscious we get. But this may be very different from what you've heard, or maybe very similar. I just wanted to bring a lot more light to Awakening and Ascension and what this is, right? So there's a whole ton of souls working through their awakening right now, and it's just so beautiful and so powerful. But the next phase is to actually deal with yourself. It's not to just look at it. It's to actually, the next piece is it's the big piece. It's the most powerful piece. It's the most freeing piece. It's to go in and it's to start to release and take responsibility for everything. And Gaia comes along with me on that one. I love that. Right? That's the big new phase that a whole bunch of people are coming into right now. There's massive collectives coming in and getting pushed into the traumatic part. And it's not meant your whole life's going to be traumatic, not at all. It just means that all your stuff that's stuck, all your density, all your deep victim stories, the painful memories, the emotions, that's all starting to surface like over and over. And it's not going to stop. You'll get periods where you can just have beautiful expanded days and things like that. It's not going to take you down 24/7. But it's going to start to consume your reality until you start to actually really deal with it. Like it's like we have to deal with this stuff. And to the human, they don't want to deal with this stuff. I didn't. We've stuffed it away forever. Does that mean we really want to just jump in and take care of it? No. It's going to be a bit of a, I'll use the word battle for a little while, because for me it was a battle to have to force myself to do it. It was a battle to want to care. But then I'd be consumed with my own stuff and my stories, and I'd have to look at it, and I started to have to realize, like, I actually created something I was victim to. I actually instigated it and created it. But I pushed away all the pieces that I had to do with it, and I just blamed another person. And that's what we do very well as humans. We blame other people, and we miss the whole point. So you're going to notice when I'm talking about taking responsibility, we're going to feel like a lot of stories and a lot of things happen to us. But a lot of those things that you feel happened to you, or I felt happened to me, you're going to start to realize that a lot of that was us instigating it, and then I'll say magnetizing it to us, but that's another piece. But you start to see how you actually called that to yourself and how you actually instigated it and made it escalate. And then how all of a sudden you took away all the pieces that the other person might have said or done, and then now all of a sudden we're just a massive victim to that story. Because humans are really good at being a victim to things. And I speak to victim like nothing, because people don't realize how victim we all really are to a lot of things, even to life and reality. And that's okay. There's no judgment to that. Like, that's just the ego. It's part of the ego. It's just normal, right? But until we put eyes on all this and start to integrate and understand all this, we don't even know what the ego really is. Like when I ask people, they don't really know, and I don't care what they say. I just always like to. I'm interested to see where everybody comes from and what everybody feels things are. Because if we go on to, say, the internet and search what's the ego, you get a completely different understanding of it than what I just gave. If you go and ask what awakening or ascension is, it'll be totally different from what I just said for the most part. So it's our job to actually go inside and feel all these things and what feels good and what feels right. And that's how I came through my journey, was through feeling. If I was to just listen and go through my head, I would have never made it. Because my head needed to understand everything. Whereas this journey becomes trusting what they call the unknown. But nothing's really unknown. It's just unknown until you open it up, and then it's not unknown anymore. The more conscious you become, the more we activate our DNA. The more we activate our DNA, the more we remember. Because our DNA is coded with everything. It's the portal to quantum consciousness, to universal consciousness. Our heart is the portal to that. So what we're doing as we're ascending is we're moving from a mind-based lower consciousness into our heart, where our heart guides everything. Everything comes through our heart. Our heart is the guide. Everything's filtered through there. We live from our heart now. We don't live from our mind. When we live in the mind, everything's confusing. We think and we try and figure things out. When we live in our heart, we feel, and everything just comes. All the information just opens up. If you were to think, if you say I think, you're opening up your mind. If we say I feel, we're opening up our heart. Two completely different ways to go, and two different answers you're going to get. Two completely different journeys. So we're walking into a heart-based journey. We're wanting to walk into all of our fears. We're wanting to walk into all of our judgments, all of our emotions. We want to have massive emotional releases, but we also don't want to become victim to those emotional releases, which can be very easy. Because when the traumas start coming back up and we're working through them and we need to cry it out, you can start off with the intention of a conscious release, and then all of a sudden you can catch yourself crying your eyes out and yelling at the person very upset. And that's perfectly normal, but then you got to get to the pieces where we don't get upset anymore and we're releasing the upset part. And you get that all out, and then we start to resolve and dissolve it and take responsibility and really want to see the bigger picture. And then we start to ask ourselves, I want to see the bigger picture. I want to see the bigger picture. I want to open this up. I want to open this up. And then we realize how powerful we are, that we can ask for anything we want inside of our body, and it'll start to just do it. Our light body wants to give us anything we want when it comes to consciousness and working through things. But we have to want to intentionally work through it all. That's the key. If we're avoiding and saying, I'll do this later, it's going to get more intense. In the beginnings of awakening, it's not so much like that, but as more are being pushed further and further into their journey, collectively, that's why I call it collective awakening and ascension, you're starting to have to deal with that stuff. You know, the ascension won't begin until we release all that stuff, or like the true ascension journey doesn't begin until we start to intentionally release all this stuff. So awakening merges into ascension. Awakening is basically pre-ascension. It merges into ascension. We start to ascend our consciousness by taking responsibility and resolving and dissolving all of what we created in this 3D world, all the unconsciousness. We ascend our consciousness. We begin to embody a fifth dimensional frequency, right? Because the dimensions are frequencies we embody. They're not places we go, right? Not like the movies. Again, trying to show us everything backwards. Dimensions are frequency embodiments. They're an embodiment we hold. We master ourselves in that reality, and we now embody that dimension. And then we hold and we anchor that. And we stabilize that. We're the living anchor of the fifth dimensional frequency, and then you keep moving up. 6D is the beginning of physical body ascension, and that goes to about 8D. It's a very, very powerful journey, but very physical, right? The physical body ascension part becomes very, very physical. So I'll speak to that a lot more and more. just crazy weird things start happening within the body, and it's all part of it, because everything needs to be shaken up, shaken loose. You know, that's how the density starts to come out. You know, our bodies are turning more into light from carbon, so all these processes are happening. Yeah, it's so beautiful, but it's a lot bigger than is being talked about in circles that I notice out in the world. So my mission is to get the higher perspective out from where I embody, from my embodiment. So my journey is to get out stuff about awakening, ascension, and all the different pieces and parts to that, the bigger parts that I'm not seeing out there, sharing just from my own journey. I'm not saying what's right and wrong, I'm just sharing from my journey and how I made it through, because that's my role. My role is to do that, and I'm just going to keep doing that. So if you have anything that you'd really like me to talk about regarding ascension or awakening, like please comment. I'd love to speak to some things that people want to hear about and get deeper into and understand from a higher perspective. I'd love that. You know, let's keep it towards awakening and ascension and anything to do with that. I would love that. So for now, I'll stop here. I just wanted to give a beautiful opening into some higher processes that we're meant to work through, and why you might be feeling a lot of intensity with emotion and past traumas and all this stuff, and just, you know, just the outer world, you know, collapsing. And just to finish, the outer world's going to keep collapsing along with our inner world. They're both collapsing together, and it's perfect. It's beautiful. It's supposed to be happening. Everything that's happening is happening exactly as it's supposed to be happening. My next video, one of the next videos, I'm gonna get deeper into choice, the power of choice, choice point, presence and observation, and how they all come together. How presence and observation allow us to see the choice point. They allow us to see ourselves on a much deeper level. And if we're not being present, we're actually not seeing how our reality is being created, and we're not realizing why a bunch of things are happening. So I'll get into a lot of this stuff, because our choices are everything. And when we're conscious about our choices, we're creating a beautiful reality. And when we're not conscious, when we're not being present to our choices and our unconscious choices, we're creating a reality that we don't really want to experience, and we don't really know that we're doing that. So I want to get deep into that. I want to get deep into that, and I'm going to do put together just a small workshop about it too. So anyways, I love you all so much. Thank you so much for everything you do for yourself, for everyone else. We're all supporting each other, doing our own thing. We're all doing our own uniqueness and our own beautiful things in our own way, and I just love that. Keep sharing, loving, being, doing. I'm here for you. If you have questions, let me know. I want to be there for anyone who's coming through and wants to see the bigger picture. So I love you. Take care.